Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Turn On Engagement podcast. Today, we've got a very special guest, Heather Summerer, Associate Director of Public Affairs at Pratt& Whitney. You might know Pratt& Whitney as a large aerospace manufacturing company, military engines, jet engines. I'm going to talk to Heather today about some really, really cool stuff that she's doing. Specifically, you got to hear how this company handled the pandemic for employee communications, employee engagement. They did some really, really cool things. They transformed their business to help communities. Literally, almost overnight, went from making jet engines to face masks and PPE, and really transforming the company and the culture. And she's going to talk about how it's changed them as they move forward in terms of employee communications and engagement. It's a really great, uplifting story. I hope you'll listen to it. Stay tuned. It's all coming up next on Turn On Engagement. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Turn On Engagement podcast. I'm Yash, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Engagement over at HubEngage. And today we've got a very exciting guest on the podcast today. I'm very excited to talk to her. Heather Summerer is the Associate Director of Public Affairs at Pratt & Whitney, a very large, well-known aerospace company just down the street in good old Connecticut down there, just down the street from us, from up here in Boston. But you probably know Pratt & Whitney for commercial jet engines. I think that's probably what we think of when we think of Pratt & Whitney. But a diversified company, I believe owned by Raytheon now, which is up here in Massachusetts as well. But Heather, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on today. So I'm really curious and really interested in how a company, particularly the size of Pratt & Whitney, has addressed employee engagement and employee communications during COVID-19. A lot of companies have had to change on the fly. Every company I talk to has a different story of how they handled it last year. Just really interested of how you guys adapted to it and what you guys had to do over at Pratt & Whitney.
Well, I think from our standpoint, consistency in our communications was key. We had, much of our workforce was working from home. We still had employees who were, actually putting their hands on the engines, building the engines, who were coming in every day as our essential workers. So we had to be very consistent. We had to be very regular about our communications, allow the employees to know, oh, on this day, we're going to get this newsletter and it's going to tell us, what's new, what new safety precautions are in place, what they can expect to see if they are coming in, or if you are work from home and for some reason you do have to go in, what's that going to look like? Because things have changed, maybe not all the entrances are open. You have to do a temperature screening. So these regular communications were really important to us. And, work from home folks are accustomed to getting information through email. Our frontline workers, they need to get it right from their supervisors in their morning toolbox talks before they go and do their job assignment for the day. So, I think that for us was a key to success in keeping everything going and, kind of managing the expectations of the employee.
That's great. And you mentioned message consistency, and I think that's really, really important. A lot of companies, struggled with that, just in terms of making sure that it's business as usual, but we're living in the new normal now, inside of how we work every single day, how we interact with people. So keeping the message consistent, but also keeping them well informed of health and safety and operational changes, I think is really, really important. You mentioned, people that are actually on the floor, the manufacturing floor, those types of people. How about your office workers as well? Do you guys use different tools to reach them? You mentioned newsletters. You talked about, was it a toolbox or toolkit? What types of channels do you guys use?
Well, we are such a diverse company. We're also a global company that we much have to use everything that's at our disposal.
Right.
Email is a very good way to communicate with our employees who are working from home. Those toolbox talks I mentioned, that's face-to-face communications where these frontline supervisor is flowing down information that's come from the communications organization right to the workers. Everybody's getting the same messages. They might just be getting them a little bit differently. And we also have to translate into several different languages for our global workforce. One of the big changes for us is that information that generally came right from, say, the corporate office, now with the global sites, they had to pick up a lot of that stuff because their safety protocols may be a little bit different. And exactly, if you don't have all of your entrances open, or if you're going to have a certain kind of screening, I mean, those were things that really needed to be addressed right there at the site. One of the other big changes that we had was we had a new president start kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, which is always when you have a big leadership change like that. It's always interesting to see what will happen. And he really took on communicating directly with the supervisors once a month. There's a huge call. And he talks very frankly about the challenges of working from home. He has young kids, his wife has a full-time job. He's running our company, our global company. And, it doesn't always go smoothly, as we all know. And I think, having him reach out to the supervisory folks in the company and share his challenges, really made everybody feel like, wow, we're all in this together. We're all feeling the same things. Some days it goes really great. And, other days things just don't go as smoothly. You're in the middle of a meeting and, one of your children runs in or something like that. So I think he's really personalized it a lot. And I think the feedback from the employee base on his experience and direct contact in communicating about the situation has really been valuable.
That is fantastic. I love to hear it when leadership gets involved and they really lead by example. I think one of the most important lessons that we've learned from working throughout this pandemic is when leaders can humanize themselves and they can get down to every level of the organization. It doesn't matter what you do, if you're an hourly employee or you're an executive, right? Sitting in the corner office, it doesn't matter. But, we all share the same pains and the same emotions, and we're all in this together and going through this roller coaster ride. If leadership can, also share the examples of, hey, I've got kids too, and I've got, these issues, and yeah, my wife works full time, and all the things you mentioned there. It's just fantastic to see that. And there's a lot of data out there that would support that when leadership gets involved, when leadership plays an active role in communications to employees, particularly with, I call these sort of, nuggets of gold when you strike an emotional connection with somebody that you work with. It increases productivity, satisfaction, morale, all across the board. That in line will then, eventually translate to a better product or service or whatever it is that you're creating, an overall better customer experience, which obviously will then increase your sales. And, hopefully it translates all the way across the board and, it hits your bottom line and your ROIs there. So you see a financial implication as well. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely great. And a great segue into my next question. How do you see your internal communications aligning up to your external communications? So your brand promise, the things that you represent. Obviously, Pratt & Whitney is a large company, but has a deep history, right? Has been around for a long time. I would say there isn't a single person that hasn't experienced one of your products. I mean, if we've all been on an airplane, we've unknowingly, been the beneficiary of one of your products. How do you connect the dots, and how do you make sure that your internal, external messaging is aligned?
Well, there's a team of people that collaborate on our communications, so they aren't done independently; they're done together, in concert with each other. It assures alignment, and we also make sure that the organizations are all being represented. When you are out on the shop floor, and you're touching the machine and building those engines, there may be some nuances to things that are happening in that environment that we might not see in an office environment or for the workers who are working from home. So it's important that we have people who represent and have that voice at the table as we are making the messages, are writing the messages, especially when you talk about we have military engines, we have commercial engines. We want to make sure that what's going out to those customers is also very consistent. We want them to know, hey, we're taking the safety of our workers very, very seriously, and we want to make sure that we can continue to deliver on our customer commitments. And, that needs to all be woven into our messaging. I think that it's critical to, build those consistent messages and build them together.
Yes, absolutely. I think that alignment is really important. And it's good to hear that. It sounds like it starts at the ground floor, that your internal and your external teams are working together, which is really good, and that'll pretty much guarantee your message consistency across the board. I know there's a lot of companies that often don't think of their employees first, right? They think of their customers, and of course that's the bottom line. At the end of the day, that's what they're pressured to do. But then they do some employee communications from time to time, but it doesn't necessarily match up to the brand promise, and then you get a disconnect there. So hearing that you guys are doing it together from the ground up, the internal and the external teams, is really great. Lastly, I just kind of want to wrap up and ask you a little bit about how has the pandemic caused this shift in communications in terms of your culture and your strategy? Do you see a time where, hopefully we round the corner on the pandemic, and we can start to get back to somewhat sense of normalcy, in the years to come. But if you kind of had a crystal ball and were to look at it, knowing everything that you know about this year, do you see Pratt & Whitney going back to traditional communication tactics, things like that, or is it going to constantly require a changing shift in how you think and in the paradigm of your strategy? What does the future really look like for employee communications and engagement at Pratt & Whitney?
I think it really has changed. I think as the workforce is changing, some of these practices that we've put in place are going to be here to stay. Mm-hmm. I also think that, just from a culture standpoint with communications, we've seen a lot of shifts at Raytheon and at Pratt & Whitney. One in particular is how we are positioning ourselves in the local communities and the importance that holds with our employee base. And they really want to be a part of that. When the pandemic originally started, and we actually shifted some of our production into making face shields to be donated back to frontline workers. And our employees were really excited to be able to do something. You heard about all these manufacturing companies that were changing their lines to help with the pandemic. How can an engine company possibly contribute to that? And our brilliant engineers figured out a way. And we were producing face masks, and we actually had a waiting list of employees who wanted to help with the 3D printing, with quality control, packaging, shipping. The whole, people would just call and say, how can I be a part of that? We also partnered with the state and community health centers to open the largest drive-through vaccine center in Connecticut on our deactivated runway on our property. This is something else that gets on the news all the time about this particular vaccine center. It's right on our runway. It's in the name, Pratt & Whitney runway. Our employees are really proud of that. And I think it's a really important message that we continue to drive externally in the local communities. When we step back and things were kind of coming at us and you didn't really know what was coming next. It was stuff that didn't really fit into what was your typical strategy and how you interacted with the community previously. But I think people were at a place where they just wanted to do something. And our leadership was in that place where they were like, let's figure it out. Let's, figure out how we can stand up this vaccine center on our property. There was lots of different things. We hosted a trick or treat event for the kids in the town. East Hartford is the town where our headquarters is located. And we spent a whole day out there with all sorts of businesses from the community. It was a drive-through thing, and we just were dropping candy in residents' cars. We were able to make donations of face masks and hand sanitizer and the paper gowns that we use in some of our labs, and we were able to donate those back to hospitals. We even, around December, we were looking, how do we just a little thank you to our employees who have been coming into work every day. We can't have the holiday parties that we used to have at the end of the year. So we decided to give each one of our employees a voucher to go buy lunch at a local restaurant that was privately owned. And, we were able to do this at 10 different states across the US. We were able to give a little bit of support to more than a dozen restaurants. Some of our employees even was like, this is great, thank you very much, but I'd like to take the money that I would have gotten for the restaurant and give it to the food pantry in the local area. So even, there was kind of a little turn of events with that effort that our employees took on and said, give my money to the food shelter. So, I think there's so many, you just didn't know what was coming towards you. And I think we just got really flexible and said, okay, we donated laptops to a local school. I mean, these things just wouldn't typically fall into our run of the mill strategy. But I think everybody just was so shocked at how the pandemic rolled out and wanted to be a part of doing something positive. And, as a company, we should tell that story and tell, the story about how we are a part of the community and we should be a part of a solution.
I love it. What a great story. And I'm so glad you shared this story with us. Thank you. It's hearing, a company adapt the way you guys adapted and just all the things you did, involving the community, literally taking your deactivated runway and turning that into something good that was desperately needed at that time. And not just because it's what we needed to, fight the pandemic and the things that were going on, but giving people a sense of belonging and commitment. It really goes to show the culture of your company and, how you guys took that and almost made it external right there. I mean, you guys sounds like you guys did a bang up job with it. And I'm just so glad to hear it, particularly for a company that traditionally is, obviously known for military engines, commercial jet engines. And then you think, okay, the pandemic happens, all the airlines are, slowing down, nobody's traveling anymore. Eventually that, that effect is going to, come to your business as well. But there is so much good that you can do, coming up with, producing PPE and the face masks and things like that. It really goes to show, your corporate responsibility, your social responsibilities. These things don't go away no matter what. And, we often rely on government and things like that to help us, but, private corporations, no matter how big or small, can all play a role and support each other and uplift each other. I loved hearing about the restaurants and, supporting local business and things like that. This has been really uplifting to hear. It certainly made my Monday morning, and I hope everybody listening on this will also be enlightened and uplifted and inspired to maybe do some of the things that Heather talked about here as well. If you'd like to contact Heather or read more about her, we'll include her LinkedIn profile link in the video description up on YouTube. So definitely connect to Heather there, and hopefully she'll be able to answer any further questions about what they did at Pratt and Whitney there. But Heather, I'd really like to thank you for joining the show today. I hope you enjoyed being on as well, and we'd love to have you on again in the future.
I did. Well, thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And stay tuned. We will have the next podcasts coming up this week. We've got some great companies coming in healthcare, retail, and, of course, manufacturing, where we'll talk about all things employee engagement and communication. Hey there, employee communications and HR folks. We've got some big news to share over here at HubEngage. We've officially been made a Society of Human Resource Management recertification provider. So if you're a SHRM member and you're in need of getting your mandatory recertification credits, you can tune into our new webinar series where we educate and train you on a variety of HR-related topics and trends, so you're up to date on your continuing education requirement. SHRM is a great place for all things HR, and with this exciting new partnership HubEngage has created, we can now recertify you while you turn on engagement at the same time inside of your company. For more details and to sign up for a recertification course with one of our HubEngage SHRM certified experts, visit hubengage.com and click on the SHRM tab under resources to get started today.